into one of the most well-known stories in Western culture, I guess.
Yeah.
The creation narrative, Genesis chapter 1.
Right.
You might think you know it, but we're going to go deeper. We're going to look at, it's a story that's been debated for centuries.
Yeah.
Theologians,
Well,
philosophers.
it's for millennia, really.
Exactly.
This is a text that has been foundational and continues to spark debate and discussion even today.
So it all starts with primal chaos,
Right.
the spirit hovering over the waters, formlessness.
Darkness.
What do you make of that initial state?
Well, it's interesting. It almost feels like a blank slate, a void full of potential, ready for this incredible act of creation. And then the neat thing about it is that the creation comes through, divine speech.
Ah, yes, the iconic "Let there be."
Let there be light.
It comes again and again.
Right.
It creates light. It separates the sky from the waters.
Establishes order.
The world as we know it.
What's really interesting about this creation account is that it's not just about creating things, but it's this act of separation, defining boundaries, differentiating light from darkness.
So it's not just what's created, it's the way
Okay.
it's organized,
Heavens from the earth.
which kind of reminds me of how, as humans,
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And this desire for order is mirrored in the way the narrative unfolds. You see a deliberate progression from these celestial bodies that mark time
Yeah,
to this teeming life that fills the seas and eventually the land.
like a symphony.
Yeah,
Each element carefully placed,
it is.
giving its moment to shine.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
boom, we reach the pinnacle of creation.
Humankind.
And the language changes dramatically. It's no longer just a simple "let there be."
Right. It shifts to, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness.
Okay, so that raises a lot of questions.
It does.
Who is this us, first of all? Is it hinting at a plurality within the Godhead?
Right.
Is it some angelic beings?
Or is it just majesty, the royal we?
Oh, I see. So that raises the next question then. What does it mean to be made in the image of God?
Right.
Is that physical form?
Right.
Is it dominion over creation? Is it something more intangible?
Well, theologians throughout history have wrestled with this very question. Some point to our capacity for reason,
Right.
our moral conscience,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to love,
To create.
to create.
Yes.
Others point to our role as stewards of creation, tasked with caring for the world that God has made. So there's a variety of interpretations, and really, the text kind of intentionally leaves that open for our own contemplation.
It's kind of inviting us to go deeper into what it means to be human.
Exactly. It's a question that resonates across time and cultures, and then it leads directly into the next layer of this narrative.
Okay.
The mandate given to humankind.
Cool.
Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish.
Okay, so we're made in God's image, and we're given this incredible responsibility.
Right.
But this dominion over creation, how has that been interpreted, especially in light of modern concerns
Right.
about environmentalism?
That's where it gets really interesting, because some see this mandate as a justification for exploiting natural resources
Right.
for human benefit. And others say it's more about responsible stewardship. It's about ensuring the well-being of the planet.
So it's not just a free pass to do whatever we want with the earth.
Right.
It's more of a balancing act. We got to utilize the resources.
Right. And it's a tension that we're still grappling with today.
It's like this ancient story almost anticipates the challenges we face today
It does.
in the 21st century,
Right.
reminding us that our actions have consequences. But the big question is, what did God intend for humanity's sustenance in this newly created world?
That's a great question.
What did he want us to eat?
And it leads us into the next section of the creation account, where God provides food for both humans and animals. And what's fascinating is the text really highlights plants as that initial source of food for both humans and animals. So it paints this picture of a harmonious ecosystem, where all beings are kind of interconnected and provided for.
It almost sounds like a vegetarian utopia or something. Everyone just kind of peacefully coexisting, living off the land.
Yeah.
But how does this idea of provision kind of play out in later interpretations
Yeah.
of Genesis?
Yeah, that's where it gets a little more complex.
Say,
Because
okay.
initial harmony, you could say, it's disrupted, after the fall.
And Genesis chapter 3. And the introduction of sin brings with it toil and struggle and changes in the human diet. So, the relationship between humans and the natural world, including what we consume, becomes more complicated. It's not this idyllic picture.
Right.
of effortless abundance.
Exactly. And this shift has,
Yeah.
fueled all kinds of debates
Mm.
about the ethics of eating meat, the impact of agriculture on the environment, our responsibility toward animal welfare.
It's like this concept of provision
Yeah.
just opens this Pandora's box of ethical and theological questions.
It really does, yeah.
But before we go too far down that path, I wanted to circle back to something we touched on earlier. The Sabbath is mentioned briefly at the end of the creation account. But it seems like such a significant concept. Why is that?
It's crucial to understanding this rhythm and intentionality built into the very fabric of the universe.
Right.
It's often overshadowed.
It is. It's like an afterthought.
Right.
God's like, oh, good. Glad that's over. Time to put my feet up.
Right, but it's much more deliberate than that. It's a deliberate act of ceasing from work, recognizing that creation is complete and inherently good. And by resting on the seventh day, God sets this precedent, this pattern for humanity to follow.
So it's not just about taking a break, but also about acknowledging the goodness of what has been created, aligning ourselves with that divine rhythm.
Absolutely. The Sabbath is a time for contemplation, for appreciating the beauty of creation, for connecting with the divine. And it's a reminder that our worth isn't tied to our productivity, but to our very being.
That's such a powerful message, especially in today's world. We're constantly bombarded with this pressure to do more, achieve more, be more.
Right. It's like we've forgotten the art of simply being.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the Sabbath is so relevant today. It's this countercultural practice, that challenges us to slow down, to disconnect from that relentless pace of life, and reconnect with ourselves, with each other, and ultimately with the source of all creation.
Almost like hitting the reset button.
Yeah.
Allowing us to just be renewed and refreshed, physically and spiritually.
Exactly. And this rhythm of work and rest, creation and contemplation. It's not just good for us individually, but it's also essential for the well-being of society as a whole. It fosters a more sustainable and balanced and ultimately more humane way of life.
So we've explored these themes of order and provision, humanity's role, the Sabbath. What other layers of meaning are waiting to be uncovered in this ancient text?
Well, one fascinating aspect is the recurring emphasis on goodness.
Yeah.
Throughout the creation account, God repeatedly sees that. What he has made is good.
Yeah.
It culminates in this declaration that everything is very good. On the sixth day.
Almost like a divine seal of approval, like an affirmation of the inherent beauty and value of the created order. But
what does that goodness actually entail? I mean, is it purely aesthetic? Is it about functionality? Or does it point to something deeper?
That's a great question, and it's sparked a lot of debate.
Theologians, philosophers, some argue that goodness refers to the inherent order and harmony of creation, the way everything just fits together in this purposeful and interconnected way.
So not just about things looking pretty or working efficiently, but about this deeper sense of rightness, a fundamental alignment as a divine plan.
And this idea of inherent goodness has implications for how we understand our own place in the world. If creation is fundamentally good, then perhaps there's a basis for hope, for believing that even amidst suffering and brokenness, there's this potential for redemption, for restoration, for things being made right.
That's a powerful thought, especially in a world that often feels so chaotic and divided. It's like this ancient story offers a glimmer of light, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, goodness persists. But how does that inherent goodness translate into action? How are we meant to live in a way that reflects and honors that goodness?
That's where the ethical implications of the creation story come into play. If we're part of a creation that is fundamentally good, then we have a responsibility to act in ways that uphold and enhance that goodness. It's a call to be stewards of the planet, to care for the vulnerable, to work toward justice and peace.
So it's not just about passively appreciating the beauty of creation.
Right.
It's about actively participating in its ongoing unfolding, contributing our unique gifts and talents to make the world a more beautiful and just place.
Precisely. But even in that goodness, there's this potential for its opposite. From the very beginning, you have this darkness, this formless void. And then later on, you have the introduction of temptation and disobedience and the fall. So it's not like the story shies away from this darker side of things.
Yeah, it doesn't pretend that everything's just perfect and rosy. It acknowledges that there's brokenness in the world. And that kind of makes it feel more real, more relatable, you know?
I think so. It resonates with our own struggles, our own awareness of both the beauty and the brokenness in the world around us.
So that raises the question, where does this darkness come from? If creation is inherently good, how do we explain evil? Is it some outside force that invades creation, or is it somehow built into the fabric of existence?
Those are some big questions, and there are no easy answers. But I think the fact that the story acknowledges both good and evil makes it a more honest and ultimately a more helpful guide for navigating the complexities of life.
It's like this ancient text is already grappling with the same stuff we're still trying to figure out today. Like, what's our role in all of this? How do we deal with suffering and injustice? How do we live in a world that's both beautiful and broken?
And it doesn't just give us answers on a silver platter, it invites us to wrestle with these questions, to engage with the fullness of human experience, both the light and the dark.
It's almost like it's saying, hey, look, there's good and bad in the world, and you have a choice.
Yeah,
You can either sit back and watch it all unfold, or you can step up and try to make a difference.
exactly. It's a call to action, a challenge to move beyond passive observation and become co-creators, agents of healing and restoration, bearers of light in a world that desperately needs it.
So it's not just a story about the past, but also a guide for the present and the future.
Exactly. And even though it grapples with some tough stuff, it ultimately offers a message of hope. It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, the potential for good persists. And it calls us to be a part of that, to be agents of transformation, to co-create a world that reflects this vision of harmony and peace that we see in the creation story.
Wow. What an incredible journey this has been. We've only scratched the surface, but it's clear that the Genesis creation narrative is so much more than just an ancient story. It's a living text that still speaks to us today, challenges us to think deeply, act responsibly, and live in a way that honors the goodness of creation. So as we wrap up this episode, we encourage you to keep exploring this text. Read it, think about it, talk about it, and let it inspire you to be a force for good in the world. Until next time, happy exploring.